Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Simmons. This is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, June 4th, 2020. Today I want to talk about the idea of judgment and its relationship to critique. This idea was suggested to me by Craig Boyd, a philosopher, and he suggested that we think about this because it is something that is showing up rather frequently right now as a confusion in social media. In particular, there are numerous people who are quoting Matthew 7, "Judge not lest ye be judged," as a way of silencing those engaged in legitimate critique of our racist system, our society right now, and the failure of our national leadership to respond adequately to it. But those people who use this passage in that sort of way fundamentally misunderstand the passage itself, and they mistakenly equate judgment with critique. So I have two thoughts here that hopefully will propel us forward in productive ways. First, judgment is about overcoming your own sense of self-aggrandizement and your own sense of perfection. In other words, the reminder to avoid judgment is a reminder to remain humble. It's important that the passage, "Judge not lest ye be judged," comes immediately before the idea that we should be careful to talk about the speck in the eye of another while ignoring the log in our own. In other words, we've got to be very careful about calling others vicious if we are unwilling to recognize the temptation to vice that threatens all of us. This is not, however, a refusal to engage in critique. It is instead a recognition that critique can only be legitimate when we take responsibility for the fact that we too are often guilty of the things that we are trying to change in others. Point two, when we do engage in critique, we in fact tap into a decidedly biblical tradition, the prophetic tradition of speaking truth to power. Now, importantly, in doing this, we've got to recognize that critique also starts with oneself. When I say this person is failing as a leader, I also have to then think about how am I treating those within my community, those who look to me for leadership. When I say, hey, this is racist, do I also then take the time to engage in the hard work of checking my own implicit bias and recognizing the ways in which I often ignore the racialized framing by which my own thinking proceeds? It's important that we recognize the humility that overcomes judgmentalness is also the humility that motivates legitimate critique. When we engage in the prophetic work of speaking truth to power, that doesn't mean that we elevate ourselves as prophets speaking on behalf of the divine. Instead, we recognize that we too are often guilty. This is something I think that Dostoevsky reminds us so well when he says that it's important we recognize we are all guilty before all, but I more than all the rest. Let's start with our own self-critique, but not as a way of refusing then to turn outward, refusing then to link arms and transform the social structures, refusing to engage in the protests, refusing to lift our voice so that freedom can reign. Neighbor love cannot stop with self-critique, but it must start there. May we uncover our implicit bias. May we pull the log from our own eye, but then let's help our neighbor recognize the speck in their own. May we all find our voices in this moment, and yet remember that sometimes finding our own voice is being able first to listen to the voices of others. I'll see you tomorrow unless a piano falls on our heads.